Hello everyone, Seven Bart here, and welcome to the event of Happy Sulli-Days. It is that time of year again, and I'll be starting off this Christmas season with a compare and contrast of two really good Christmas movies. In 1947, 20th Century Fox released Miracle on 34th Street, which has become one of the most beloved of Christmas movies, and still remains a classic. Since then, only two made-for-TV films of the story have been made in 1955 and 1973. But then in 1994, a theatrical remake of the original was released, which made some changes from the original and is mostly split by many. But which one is better? So let us begin this compare and contrast of Miracle on 34th Street with Santa Claus, or Kris Kringle. Played by Edmund Gwenn in the original and the late Richard Attenborough in the remake. With Gwenn, he plays him as a very cheerful and jolly fellow, always positive yet pretty strict when knowing who's naughty or nice. With Attenborough, he does have his jolly quality and even a nice smile, and even gives a little speech about what he stands for. But in terms of which one's better, well, seeing as how both have the same mannerism when possessing a cheery and jolly nature, my choice would be with Gwenn in this. Mainly because he's pretty believable at being Santa. He's the kind of Santa you'd like to visit and see every Christmas. And he still works even when he's confused, sad, or angry. Attenborough is a likable Santa, but when he gets angry or surprised, I'm not sure what to think of it. I don't know if it's its bulgy eyes or what, but it just feels different. So I do give credit to Attenborough for doing his best, but Gwenn gets my vote in this comparison, as well as winning an Oscar for this role. The old wins. Next, let's go over the second main character in the movie, Susan Walker. Played by Natalie Wood in the original and Mara Wilson in the remake. Wood acts pretty natural as a kid, and the same would go with Wilson. But in my opinion, both have two different problems. With Wilson, she often talks like she's a teen or a grandparent. And Wood, while still a kid, sometimes acts a bit silly, and it kinda comes off as awkward. I know she's a kid and she does well, but I'm not sure about it. But while Wilson has those teen-like speeches, she still seems to be good. Sure, she does things that many kids don't really do, but whenever she has a little speech, it would bring out a little chuckle from me. Yes, Wood is pretty fine and good and innocent, but for me, I'd go with Wilson, because what other big-name kid would star in a John Hughes Christmas production from Fox? The new wins. Now it's time to look at the supporting cast. Both movies have a lot of supporting characters, but I'll only go over 4 of them. The mother, the lawyer, the general manager, and the judge. So I'll give credit to Alvin Greenman, who plays Alfred in the original and the doorman in the remake, all growing up. The mother, Doris Walker, played by Maureen O'Hara in the original, is very natural and is very strict about believing in fantasies. In the remake, being named Dory Walker, played by Elizabeth Perkins, has the strictness, but doesn't feel natural in any way. I mean, she's mainly okay, but she's pretty bland in her delivery. So my choice is O'Hara for this. The lawyer, Fred Gailey, played by John Payne in the original, has plenty of confidence in what he does and is willing to convince everyone of the matter at hand. In the remake, being named Brian Bedford, played by Dylan McDermott, doesn't have that kind of confidence that Payne has. Sure, he's supportive of Kris and Susan like the original, but he tries too hard to have Dory be his own. All Gailey needs to do is to convince her. So naturally, Payne's the one I go for, because he's the kind of lawyer I'm willing to be with. What about the general manager, Mr. Shellhammer, played in the original by Philip Tunn and in the remake by Simon Jones? Well, they both are a fine and good support, but Tunn is just pretty funny to watch and is used most often in the film. Where Jones is pretty much okay, but is not quite as funny as Tunn, and is not used very often. And finally there's the judge, Henry Harper, played by Gene Lockhart in the original and Robert Prowsky in the remake. They both are good and fine supports, and can't state that there's a Santa Claus. But which one do I choose? Again, I'm going with the original, mostly because he feels stuck in the situation, being pressured by Charlie, his manager, wanting him to get off the case, and his grandchildren ignoring him. And while Prowsky is introduced at the beginning of the film before Kringle's arrest, there's not much to him that makes him stand out. And yes, there are the owners of the competitive stores and a few other characters, but there's not much to them. And seeing as how I like the 4 from the original, it makes sense that it would be the winner. with some credit to the remake for trying.
The old wins. Next up is the antagonists.
Let's start with the opposing lawyer. Thomas Mera, played by Jerome Cowan in the original, and Ed Collins, played by J.T. Walsh in the remake. With Mera, he's a kind of stingy lawyer who says he likes Chris at one point, but he also wants Harper to sign the commitment papers as soon as possible. Yet, he is interesting. With Collins, he's about the same, and he's also interesting. But what makes these two different is how they act against Chris. Like I said with Mera, he does say to his wife that he likes Chris but never shows it in court, and is pretty stingy toward him. But with Collins, he presents a slimy nature against Chris, often looming over him while speaking to witnesses and to Harper, trying to get under his skin, as the film puts. So while both are pretty good, I go with Collins in this one, mainly for being a slimy character. But the other two villains are very different, yet both get Chris arrested. In the original, it's Granville Sawyer, played by Porter Hall, and in the remake, it's Tony Fallaci, played by Jack McGee. Sawyer's a psychologist at Macy who fears that Chris is a very disturbed man and would attack a person at any time, but he also gets certain facts wrong when talking to employees. Tony was Cole's original Santa until he was replaced by Chris and fired due to his drunken state. Of course this character is in the original, but he's not the antagonist and is more of a plot device. But to which one I go with, I'd say Sawyer's the one, mostly for two reasons. One, he's such a fun antagonist and a great foil for Chris, and two is when R.H. Macy fires him. Though some credit's given to the remake for keeping the antagonist simple and not using another character, even though he's never seen again after Chris's arrest.
But which version has the better?
Well, even though it's pretty split, I'd go with the remake, mainly for the simplicity and corrupt nature the two have for Chris. And yes, the original has great antagonists too, but the remake wins by just a hair.
The new wins. And finally, let's conclude this comparison with the movie as a whole.
Both of them are based on the story by Valentine Davies, yet both are pretty different. The original has great characters and a wonderful story filled with lots of detail about beliefs, laws, etc., while the remake has great music and is a simplified story from the original. But for which one I like, that's a tricky one. While the original has lots of detail, it's a little bit complicated when the story is being told through the many characters, and some moments are really glanced over. For instance, when Chris is arrested, he fails a mental examination in Bellevue. What examination? There's no scene that shows Chris taking it. We just have to assume that he took it based on the scene. The same's with the remake. It just comes out of nowhere, and we never see him take one test. But the other thing about the remake is the many times the film says Chris looks like the real Santa, and the many traits he has,
which becomes tiring and something the original doesn't do.
But the changes from the original and the remake is very noticeable. Like the characters' names are changed. Either that a real person has that name, or the studio wouldn't allow it, or something. The store names are changed too. Since Macy wouldn't use their name for the remake, the main store became a fictional store known as Coe's. And Gimbel's was not around at the time, so the competing store became another fictional store known as Shoppers Express. But the biggest change from the original is the ending, when proof's provided for Santa's existence. In the original, Gailey offers proof with letters to Santa from the New York Postal Service, which he states is a branch of the U.S. federal government. But with the remake, Bedford offers proof of a dollar bill that has the words "In God We Trust" circled, which is much simpler and allows Harper to give a good speech about it.
But there is one question I have, and it's a big flaw with both movies. If Kris Kringle really is Santa Claus, then what is his purpose for coming to New York City?
Why was he even there? Was it to show the people who don't believe him believe again? Was it to help a city have a better Christmas and make sure no one is left unhappy? Shouldn't he be at the North Pole during this time of year? It's completely unanswered and needs some attention.
But I'm only here to compare these two films, and which one do I like better?
While I do enjoy both movies and both offer details on belief, the one I go with is the remake. It presents the story in a simple manner and doesn't go too far into detail. And again, it offers great music and some beautiful imagery. Yes, the original is still a classic and has great characters and a couple of music cues here and there, and I still enjoy it. But the remake takes the cake in this round.
So, the winner in all by just a hair is the remake. So, the new wins. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Facebook or Twitter. And until next Wednesday for more of Happy Sulli-Days.